Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today, we are going to unpack one of the most haunting and until recently most baffling unsolved cases in North Carolina history: the disappearance of 9-year-old Asha Degree.
It is a case defined by its central, staggering paradox. We are talking about Asha Degree, a child described by everyone who knew her as shy, reserved, deeply obedient, and absolutely terrified of the dark.
Crucially, her mother even noted that Asha wouldn't willingly step outside the house on her own, particularly after sundown.
Yet, on the night of February 13th and into the early morning hours of February 14th, 2000, this 9-year-old child chose to walk away from her safe, sheltered home in Shelby, North Carolina.
And onto a rural highway, and she did this during a raging storm.
The elements of that night are so critical. We're not just talking about light rain. Witnesses confirmed heavy rain, near freezing temperatures, I think historically hovering around 32 to 37 degrees Fahrenheit.
And a power outage.
And a power outage that had disrupted the entire neighborhood. And Asha left without a coat, hat, or any proper cold weather gear.
And she was seen. Multiple motorists spotted this small, white-shirted figure walking south along North Carolina Highway 18 before dawn. But here is the critical pivot point of the whole mystery. When one driver, recognizing the sheer oddity of the situation, circled back to approach her, Asha didn't wait for help. She ran.
She fled the roadside and just vanished into the dense, dark woods.
That moment, her active flight from an adult offering assistance, is the last confirmed sighting.
For over 2 decades, the investigation was just stuck in this cycle of speculation. Was this a terrified runaway who went off course, or was she the victim of a calculated abduction?
But the narrative has shifted dramatically. Thanks to the relentless work of law enforcement and, critically, the application of modern forensic analysis to decades-old evidence, this case is no longer a cold missing person file. It has been reclassified.
It's now an active homicide investigation involving named local suspects with search warrants executed just this year.
Our mission today is to explore the original timeline, scrutinize the baffling anomalies found in the initial reporting and the evidence, and most critically, synthesize how modern forensic science has finally connected the scattered threads of this 24-year-old tragedy back to a specific, localized group of people.
We really need to ask, why did Asha leave that storm-lashed house, and who was waiting for her?
Okay, let's unpack the initial scene in Shelby, North Carolina, starting with the context of Asha's life. I think we need to establish the stability of her world to appreciate the sheer impossibility of her actions that night.
Absolutely. Asha Degree, born in August 1990, lived a very structured life. The sources describe the Degree household, her parents, Harold and Aquila, and her 10-year-old brother, O'Brien, as conservatives centered around faith, school, and very tight family routines.
They were highly protective parents.
Very. And the level of protectiveness is a major clue here. The sources repeatedly emphasized their vigilance against outside dangers. Aquila Degree was quite candid in interviews, explaining they specifically chose not to have a home computer or internet access.
Right, because of fears about pedophiles and child predators. This wasn't a family that allowed unsupervised access to the outside world. Asha's environment was strictly guarded.
Detail is vital. It eliminates the possibility of her being, casually lured online. It suggests that any external influence or grooming, which is the current investigative theory, had to be established through a physical presence or through someone Asha or her family trusted.
And her persona reflected that sheltered upbringing. She was not a risk taker. She was noted for being careful, obedient, and profoundly shy.
And the fact that she was reportedly very afraid of dogs and reluctant to even step outside the house willingly, that just underscores the magnitude of the motivation it would have taken to get her to walk 1.3 miles down a dark, storm-swept highway in the middle of the night.
Her actions that morning are just fundamentally inconsistent with her character.
Totally. If we look at the immediate preceding events, the only known stressor was her basketball team losing its first game of the season that Saturday. She was upset, she cried, but she appeared fine watching her brother play later that day.
So no runaway profile emerging.
Not at all. No recent arguments, no failing grades, no sign of severe emotional distress that would lead to a spontaneous flight.
Which brings us to the timeline of the night itself, February 13th, turning into the 14th, 2000. It seems instability defined the evening. starting with a car accident that plunged the neighborhood into a power outage around 9 p.m.
The power outage is crucial because it disrupts the normal sleep patterns and the family's routine. The lights finally came back on around 12:30 a.m. Harold Degree checked on the children.
And saw them asleep. This is the first verification point.
Right. Then, the second check-in, which creates the definitive window for her disappearance. Harold checked on the children again at 2:30 a.m. before he went to bed, confirming Asha and O'Brien were still in their respective beds.
So sometime after 2:30 a.m., Asha left.
And her brother, O'Brien, who was sleeping in the same room, later recalled hearing a squeak from Asha's bed, but, naturally, assumed she was just shifting positions or going to the restroom.
He had no reason to suspect anything was amiss.
None at all.
And here's where the careful planning contradicts the impulsive nature of a child in distress. Asha took a backpack that was already pre-packed. The sources confirm it contained multiple sets of clothes and personal items.
And she walked out of the house, apparently through the front door, with absolutely no sign of forced entry or struggle.
The packed bag strongly suggests the plan to be gone for some time, supporting the initial runaway theory.
But the lack of suitable gear shatters that theory. We really can't stress this enough. The weather conditions, freezing rain, a raging storm, temperatures in the mid-30s.
And Aquila later confirmed that none of Asha's coats, hats, or mittens were missing.
Right. If you are packing for a multi-day trip on foot, the first thing a child from a protected, cautious family would grab is a coat.
The fact that she didn't indicates to me one of two things. Either she was rushed, or she was absolutely convinced she would only be outside for a minute or two before entering a vehicle or a sheltered location.
It points powerfully toward an external arrangement. It does. It implies the promise of immediate shelter or transport, meaning she wasn't planning on walking the 26 miles north to Morganton. She was only intending to get from the bed to the prearranged meeting spot.
Now let's turn to the chaotic moments of discovery and the 911 call, which, well, it has generated intense scrutiny over the years. Aquila woke up at 5:45 a.m., realized Asha was missing around 6:30 a.m., and Harold placed the 911 call at 6:39 a.m.
The analysis of that call transcript it's revealing. Harold stated he needed to report a child missing, not "my daughter is missing."
That's a subtle point.
It is, but observers familiar with crisis calls often note the impersonal, almost procedural language, which stood out as detached in contrast to the situation's severity.
And what's immediately raised by analysts is the issue of the missing items. Harold immediately informed the dispatcher that Asha's book bag and her treasured Tweety Bird pocketbook were gone. Why is his immediate knowledge of those missing items such a point of discussion?
Because it seems inconsistent with Aquila's stated panic. Aquila later maintained she was so hysterical upon realizing Asha was missing that she didn't even notice the backpack was gone until much later in the day.
So the father's immediate, almost clinical report of the specific missing items, the two items most indicative of a voluntary departure, suggests he was defining the narrative for law enforcement right off the bat. This is a runaway case.
O'Brien did later back up the idea that the bag was noticed missing early, which, perhaps mitigates the suspicion on Harold somewhat. But then we introduced the matter of the alleged neighbor sighting Harold mentioned during that call.
Oh, right. He told the dispatcher that the next-door neighbor said she went down the road and said she'd just seen a kid down the road.
Yes, this alleged sighting, if it happened, would have been hours after the crucial highway sightings.
So why does that create complexity?
Because if a neighbor had just seen her moments before the 911 call, or even shortly before Yakula woke up, why did Harold not act immediately? Why did he wait to call the police? And once the call was made, why did neither parent immediately drive or run toward the reported sighting location?
Instead of staying put, waiting for law enforcement to arrive.
It's counterintuitive to parental instinct in a crisis. It suggests the sighting may have been an immediate justification provided to the police, perhaps without being fully vetted or followed up on by the family themselves.
And adding to the small, peculiar details, Harold gave the wrong house number on the 911 call 3404 instead of 3406, which was the address of his brother.
And while stress can certainly cause errors, every single small anomaly in that crucial hour, the language, the itemized list of missing items, the unpursued sighting, the wrong address, it all fueled years of speculation about the family's transparency or their role in setting the initial narrative.
These inconsistencies, while potentially explained away individually by stress or panic, collectively created dense fog that obscured the real events of the morning for investigators who were initially reliant on the family's account.
And that fog is what makes this so difficult.
So now let's clarify the real, verifiable events that happened miles away and hours earlier along Highway 18. The timeline for these crucial witness sightings is tight, between 3:45 a.m. and 4:15 a.m.
Two independent motorists confirmed the sighting, traveling south along Highway 18, about 1.3 miles from Asha's home. The weather was brutal. They saw the girl wearing a long-sleeved white shirt and white pants walking alone.
One of those drivers, the second one, was so concerned by the sight of a small child walking in a dangerous storm that they turned their vehicle around. That moment created the last known interaction.
As the driver approached her, intending to intervene or offer help, Asha immediately bolted. She left the relative visibility of the roadside and ran straight into the dense, rain-soaked woods. She was gone.
Initial police efforts, including bringing in search dogs, were immediate but failed to pick up a consistent scent trail.
Which is often attributed to the severe weather washing away any trace. The search focused intensely on a 2-3 mile radius and was eventually halted after about a week. The official conclusion at the time was that she was either a panicked runaway or she had been abducted moments after fleeing the motorist.
The dog's inability to track her beyond that initial point, despite the child's small stature, does lend significant weight to the theory that she was picked up by a vehicle very shortly after she disappeared into the trees.
Or perhaps even while she was still on the highway, escaping the motorist who tried to help her.
So that initial search stalled. The investigation moved into the cold case phase, dependent on fragments. Let's explore the evolving evidence, starting with the immediate clues found near the last sighting, and then moving to the game-changing discovery of the backpack a year and a half later.
The first items were found very quickly, on February 15, 2000, in a small, unused structure known as Turner's Shed, situated along Highway 18, not far from where she was last seen.
This was confirmation she had made it out of the house and had sought temporary shelter. Inside, investigators found candy wrappers, a pencil, a green marker,
And a yellow hair bow, which Aquila confirmed was Asha's. These items established her path.
But the shed held another highly perplexing item, a small, faded photograph of an unidentified black girl, roughly Asha's age. This one discovery immediately introduced the element of outside influence.
It's no longer just a small child in a storm. It's a child with personal items and a mysterious photograph suggesting a connection to another child or an unknown person.
This is where the initial runaway theory really began to fracture, isn't it?
Precisely. The packed bag initially screamed, "Runaway," but the photograph, combined with the extreme reluctance of Asha's known personality to leave home, pushed experts toward the grooming or luring theory.
A 9-year-old simply doesn't pack multiple sets of clothing and leave home into a freezing storm.
Unless they believe they are going somewhere safe, or being coerced by someone they trust, or who represents that trust.
And that manipulation might involve using the image of a friend or another child, perhaps the girl in the photograph, to convince Asha that the meeting was safe or even necessary.
It explains the illogical behavior. You only leave your coat if someone has convinced you the car is just around the corner, and you only run away from a well-meaning adult if you've been conditioned to fear intervention. Or if you know the person you're supposed to meet is nearby and you cannot afford to be delayed or discovered.
For 18 agonizing months, the case was stalled. Then, in August 2001, the most critical piece of physical evidence arrived, the backpack.
August 3rd, 2001. A construction crew found Asha's backpack on a work site near Morganton, Burke County. The location is immensely important. 26 miles or 42 kilometers north of her home, still along Highway 18, but a significant distance away from the original search zone.
And the manner of disposal is perhaps the strangest element of the entire case. The backpack wasn't just thrown into a ditch.
No, it was still neatly packed, wrapped in heavy-duty black plastic trash bags, double-bagged, in fact, and deliberately buried under debris.
That careful, almost preservationist effort is what allowed the case to finally break 2 decades later. But let's look at the contents, which the FBI re-examined closely in 2020. They confirmed the bag contained her personal items, but also 2 crucial external clues.
Tell us about those 2 items.
First, a copy of the children's book McElligot's Pool by Dr. Seuss, which was confirmed to be from her school library, Falston Elementary School. Second, a new Kids on the Block, or NKOTB, t-shirt.
And the key forensic revelation here is that the FBI later confirmed neither the book nor the shirt belonged to Asha.
Correct. That's the pivot. These items belonged either to the perpetrator or perhaps to another child or victim known to the perpetrator. They ceased being irrelevant filler and became potential DNA gold mines and critical links to the suspects.
And the presence of a library book, specifically from her school, is especially intriguing.
It's strange enough to carry someone else's book, but one from your school's library suggests a very specific local connection. Perhaps the book was an intentional gift or a familiar item used to gain trust, presented by someone Asha recognized as having access to her school environment.
Or perhaps it was simply an item belonging to the person who disposed of the bag, who happened to work at or near the school, or had a child who did. The crucial detail is that it was not Asha's, and the perpetrator carried it 26 miles north and buried it.
Let's delve deeper into the puzzle of the double-bagged, buried backpack. If the goal was total destruction of evidence, this method makes no sense.
Right, burning it or dropping it in the deepest part of Moss Lake would be more effective.
So what does the evidence suggest about the perpetrator's intent?
Well, we have several theories drawn from the analysis. The first is the psychological angle, the trophy mentality. The perpetrator might have been compelled to keep the items, perhaps double-bagging them to protect them from decay, with the intention of recovering them later as a grim keepsake of the crime. The burial site, however, makes this difficult to pull off.
The second theory, which relies heavily on geography, is the planting theory.
This suggests a deliberate effort to mislead investigators. Since the original search was focused so intensely on Shelby, planting the backpack 26 miles north, but still along the same major artery, could have been an attempt to make law enforcement shift their focus far away from the true site of the crime.
And the sources note a fascinating geographical detail here. The discovery site was only 7 or 8 miles south of Broughton Hospital in Morganton. Why is that specific detail relevant?
That location becomes highly suspicious when we realize that subsequent investigations, which we will get to shortly, linked a family member of the named suspects, the Deadmans, to transporting patients to and from Broughton Hospital.
So if a suspect was regularly traveling that route, burying the backpack there becomes less about random disposal and more about convenience along a known path, maybe even a panic-induced toss while conducting normal travel.
I find that compelling. But there is a third theory that some analysts argue is the most plausible, precisely because it accounts for the clumsiness. The disposal was carried out by non-career criminals who were overwhelmed and panicked.
That theory suggests they weren't aiming for forensic perfection. They were aiming for immediate relief. They double-bagged the backpack, possibly to prevent fibers, hair, or potential blood from staining their vehicle's interior.
Or simply to make the bundle look like general refuse. Then, when they thought they reached a suitably secluded spot 26 miles away, they quickly buried it and fled.
That makes more sense than a complex planting scheme. It's a panicked reaction by someone who suddenly realized the horrible gravity of possessing these items.
Regardless of the intent, the crucial fact remains. The act of double-bagging and burying the backpack, however clumsy, inadvertently preserved the physical evidence, specifically the trash bags, the backpack materials, and Asha's undershirt, long enough for 21st century DNA analysis to be applied effectively.
So the cover-up itself became the key to unlocking the truth.
The journey from a cold missing person case to an active homicide investigation is rarely achieved without dramatic technological breakthroughs. This brings us to part 3, the massive investigative shift focused on named local suspects, the Deadman family.
This shift wasn't instantaneous, was it? It was a slow, methodical accumulation of evidence that started years before the 2024 search warrants.
Right. The first major external sign came in 2016, when the FBI issued a public plea about a highly distinctive vehicle.
They theorized Asha may have been seen getting into the specific vehicle along Highway 18 that morning. Describe this car for us. It wasn't a generic sedan.
Far from it. The description was remarkably specific. An early 1970s dark green Lincoln Continental Mark IV, or possibly a Ford Thunderbird. The key visual detail was the presence of visible rust around the wheel wells.
That's a rare vehicle, especially in rural North Carolina. Its uniqueness made the tip stand out.
And the FBI was so confident they offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the car.
That level of specificity indicates the FBI had highly credible information from a witness who saw something that night. But the vehicle itself only gains its profound significance later.
Correct. In 2022, years after the original tip, reports surfaced that a rusted car resembling this exact description was recovered from Moss Lake.
And why is this important? Moss Lake is adjacent to a property owned by the Deadman family, located about 4 miles south of where Asha was last seen.
Wait, let me sure I've got this straight.
Right.
The original sighting was 1.3 miles from her home, and the Deadman property is 4 miles south of that. And the car matching the FBI's description was pulled from a lake adjacent to their property years later.
Exactly. This is where the local connection theory starts to solidify. It creates a foundational geographical link between the unique vehicle seen near the disappearance site and the suspect's physical location.
The investigation was clearly closing in on local persons of interest based on this vehicle link.
That forensic groundwork culminated in September 2024 when North Carolina officials officially reclassified Asha Degree's disappearance.
They classified her as a victim of homicide, with her body concealed. This transition from missing person to homicide victim is based on the comprehensive lack of contact over 2 decades and, more importantly, the new evidentiary results.
And the subsequent action was immediate and decisive. The FBI, the State Bureau of Investigation, and the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office executed multiple search warrants on properties owned by the Deadman family in Cleveland County.
And the basis for these warrants, as detailed in the affidavits, was the modern reanalysis of the physical evidence, specifically the sealed black plastic bags and Asha's undershirt backpack recovered back in 2001.
This is the moment the preservative effort of the perpetrator backfired entirely.
So tell us about the DNA profiles obtained from that reanalysis. What did forensic science find that had been invisible for 2 decades?
Investigators obtained 2 distinct DNA samples from the material. The first profile was linked to Russell Underhill, a local man who had died in 2004.
The second profile, which was especially crucial, was a hair stem found attached to Asha's shirt. That hair stem was genetically connected to a daughter of Roy Deadman.
So we have a network of connections emerging. DNA from a deceased man and DNA from a daughter of the Deadman household, both found on the materials linked to Asha's disappearance and subsequent evidence disposal.
Exactly. This convergence of DNA profiles is what led the search warrant affidavit to name Roy Deadman and Connie Deadman as suspects, identifying them as the 2 common links between the DNA profiles.
We need to clarify the relationship between these key figures. Why was Russell Underhill linked to the Deadmans?
The affidavits reveal that at the time of the alleged crime in 2000, Russell Underhill was under the care or supervision of Roy Deadman. This could mean he was living on the Deadman property employed by them, or potentially under some form of unofficial guardianship.
Regardless of the exact nature, the source material explicitly states Roy Deadman was providing care to Underhill, solidifying the idea that the 2 DNA profiles, the deceased man and the Deadman daughter, shared a common environment controlled by Roy and Connie Deadman.
That is the pivotal piece of information. The physical evidence found 26 miles away in 2001 now ties directly to the environment controlled by the suspects who lived just 4 miles south of the original sighting location.
And because the Deadmans had 3 daughters who were all relatively young minors in 2000, investigators logically concluded that for a crime involving disposal 26 miles away and the concealing of evidence, adult assistance from Roy Deadman and Connie Deadman would have been necessary in the execution and/or concealment of the crime.
Which shifts the focus firmly onto the adults in the household.
Let's circle back to the geographical clue we mentioned earlier, the Broughton Hospital link. The burial site was close to a route traveled regularly by one of their family members.
Yes. Investigators discovered that Lizzie Grace Deadman, a family member, was involved in transporting patients to and from Broughton Hospital in Morganton. Since the backpack was found only 7 or 8 miles south of the hospital along the same highway, it strongly reinforces the theory that the evidence disposal was not random.
It was a panicked act, carried out along a familiar travel corridor known to the Deadman associates.
And what about the physical items seized during the 2024 search warrants? The list was described as comprehensive and frankly disturbing.
It was. Items seized included a car, suggesting they may have found another vehicle of interest, multiple journals, cameras, film, children's clothing, computers, and a black trash bag, presumably to compare with the material used to wrap the backpack.
And perhaps most disturbingly, a human tooth found inside a Ziploc bag.
While the search warrants did not lead to the recovery of Asha's remains, the collection of items like journals, cameras, and the tooth suggests investigators were seeking evidence of collection, concealment, and perhaps even a trophy mentality within the household over the intervening 2 decades.
This indicates a profound dedication to connecting the dots of this potential family crime.
This case is a powerful testament to forensic persistence. Let's shift our perspective in part 4 and analyze what the 2024 breakthroughs mean for our understanding of the crime itself. How does modern forensics reframe the initial mystery?
The developments entirely validate the skepticism surrounding the initial runaway theory. The core of the case for 24 years was that Asha acted wildly out of character. The DNA evidence, the specific vehicle description, and the discovery of the backpack contents confirmed that the crime was not spontaneous.
It involved external coercion and the active involvement of at least 2 adults connected to local suspects.
It underscores the incredible importance of the non-Asha items in that buried backpack, the Dr. Seuss book, and the NKOTB t-shirt. For years, they were just oddities that complicated the case. Now they're understood as crucial links that likely belong to the perpetrator's environment.
Perhaps used as a lure or belonging to one of the dead men daughters or Russell Underhill.
And became critical clues decades later because the material preserved the DNA.
If we can imagine the scenario where the perpetrators realized the sheer weight of what they possessed, Asha's packed bag, and then clumsily tried to dispose of it, the act of double bagging to prevent trace evidence from entering their car is plausible.
They essentially created a time capsule of their own negligence, sealed in plastic, which modern science could eventually open.
The modern forensic picture confirms the grooming hypothesis. Asha's atypical behavior, leaving the house without protection in a severe storm, pre-packing a bag, was not an act of spontaneous defiance.
But an action compelled by a trusted or familiar figure, or someone leveraging the identity of someone Asha trusted.
This helps us re-examine the dramatic highway sighting. When she ran into the woods upon being approached by the motorist, her panic was not random.
No, it suggests a high-stakes, time-sensitive arrangement. Either she was terrified because the motorist was not the person she was supposed to meet, and she feared failing the arrangement.
Or she was terrified of any adult intervention because she knew she was already involved in an illicit, dangerous plan.
The original narrative defied logic. The shy, homebound 9-year-old choosing to flee her home in the worst possible weather just didn't sit right with experts or the public. The 2024 findings provide the necessary outside force, the grooming and coercion, that explains the illogical action.
This case is deeply haunting because it remained unsolved for so long, and that prolonged mystery itself raises cultural and investigative questions.
It does. A Degree asserted in a 2013 interview that Asha's case received less sustained media attention over the years compared to similar cases involving white children. She noted, "White kids who go missing get more attention. I don't understand why that is."
That observation highlights the persistent issue of racial disparity in missing persons coverage, often referred to as missing white woman syndrome, where visibility and sustained investigative resources are sometimes unequally applied.
The fact that the Degree family had to maintain annual walks and establish scholarships for decades just to keep Asha's name in the public consciousness underscores the challenge they faced in maintaining momentum for their daughter's case.
And we must also consider the small-town dynamics at play here. How could a vehicle matching the FBI's bizarrely specific description, a rusted, dark green 1970s luxury car, allegedly sit near the suspect's property or at the bottom of a lake for over 2 decades without a solid lead surfacing earlier?
It speaks volumes about the power of small-town silence, whether rooted in fear of the suspects, deep loyalty within the community, or simple unwillingness to cooperate with authorities.
Until the pressure of an ongoing FBI investigation and the promise of a reward finally broke through that barrier.
The recovery of that vehicle, the geographic connections along the route to Broughton Hospital, and the definitive DNA linkages all paint a portrait of a localized crime that was potentially hidden in plain sight for decades, requiring forensic technology to finally pierce the veil of silence and time.
It's a tragedy that started with a manipulative lure on a stormy night, survived 2 decades of cold case stagnation, and is finally being solved by science. It leaves you contemplating the sheer persistence required by the investigators and, more importantly, the Degree family.
We must remember Asha, as she was called, Shelby's sweetheart. A shy, family-oriented 9-year-old whose routines, small fears, and dreams were violently interrupted by a calculated act of grooming and coercion on that stormy night. The investigation remains focused not just on accountability for those responsible, but on the crucial recovery of Asha's remains to finally bring peace and closure to her family.
The investigation remains active, and the $25,000 reward for information is still available. If you have any details related to the disappearance of Asha Degree, you should contact FBI Charlotte at 704-672-6100.
The final provocative thought this case leaves us with, as justice nears, is the nature of the concealment itself. Does the elaborate 24-year concealment burying the backpack 26 miles away, driving a key vehicle into a lake, suggest a deep professional commitment to cover up? Or was the entire operation merely a desperate, clumsy attempt by non-criminals who accidentally sealed the one piece of evidence that would ultimately guarantee their discovery decades later? Next on Threads of Truth, we examine Donald Camp, a case filled with unanswered questions, fragmented evidence, and a disappearance that never quite added up.